What up, sports fans? Waxon Wednesday, J Waxman, time level at 2 Guys Talk Sports. Let's get the show on the move. Being a Blackhawks fan these days is really, really difficult, especially 10 years after you've won your last Stanley Cup. And that's not that long ago, of course, but the difficulty of being a Blackhawks fan is it's not just the fact that the team right now is struggling and the rebuild is going probably longer than usual, but it's also the fact that you got all these negative articles surrounding the Blackhawks. Not saying, and most of them are accurate, sadly. So then it's hard to take sometimes. Like here's one for example that just recently came out. Connor Bedard received strong warning about potential Blackhawks contract extension. So a guy by the name of Craig Button said this. Said the Chicago Blackhawks are awful. Button said, if I was Bedard's agent, I wouldn't sign him to any extension. There's no benefit to signing early. He'll make the same money if he waits until next July. Plus, waiting opens him up to potential offer sheets. Okay, I got mixed feelings about this. I'll admit, here's one thing I'm feeling about it. To guys like Craig Button, I'm just gonna say this: leave the kid alone. All right, he's only 19 years old. Let him figure these things out. Let him be a man. Let him make his own decisions, all right? And don't get your influence out of here, all right? Let him make his decision. If Bedard wants a contract extension with the Blackhawks, so be it. Let him get that extension. I'm sure he and the Blackhawks are talking about this a lot. And something tells me he wants to stay in Chicago, all right? He wants to be a Blackhawk, all right? Yes, he's had a frustrating season, but he's had a sophomore slump, but you know what? So have the Blackhawks as a team. All right, let him figure things out, okay? This is coming from a guy who's just had enough of the negative attention for the Blackhawks. All right? Of course, Bedard also, as Craig mentioned, could wait till next year and then be open to offers from other teams, which could be really, really bad for the Blackhawks. So this is also this is also me venting some frustrations as a Blackhawks fan. But now, on the other hand, hey, you know what? A lot of this, or the majority of this, is on the Blackhawks and Kyle Davidson, who's the general manager. This is their fault. This Blackhawks team, they have not made any leaps forward. And granted, this was going to be a long rebuild. I kind of figured that, but I expected at least some leaps going into this year. I didn't expect them to be like I didn't expect them to be the second worst team in the NHL this season. I thought they'd be a little better than the second worst team, but here we are. And it's no wonder why Bedard's frustrated, because this team has shown no signs of improvement this season. Granted, you could say maybe this rebuild is going on much, much longer than expected, or it's going to be a while. Those contracts, the Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane contracts, giving those two guys $10 million a year for 10 years, that buried the Blackhawks deep, and probably deeper than we can imagine. And finally, those two contracts, I think, finally expire after this season, because those were 10-year deals that were started in 2015. So now, with all that being said, so hey, the Blackhawks, all right, Craig's got a point when he says this. Hey, but Bedard needs evidence from the Chicago Blackhawks that a long-term deal is worth it, Button said. Right now, there's nothing in Chicago that makes you think staying is beneficial. And then he also mentioned on a show like there could be Bedard might be waiting for the next collective bargaining agreement to be negotiated. Here's a quote on that. Why would anyone want to sign before that? Just to see if anything changes, Friedman said. Now, if you get an idea that the rules aren't going to change, then you don't do it. But I did have someone say to me that for a star, for one of the top players, and Bedard is a franchise player in Chicago, you might want to wait and see if any rules changes. So, we'll see. There's just... it's a lot to digest. Craig's got some good points on some things. Like, hey, maybe Bedard wants to kind of wait things out and see if rules changes in terms of what offerings the teams could make before he signs a new deal. But also, look... While he's right on some things, other things, he just okay, let's just let this play out, all right? Let's just let Connor Bedard figure this out. You don't always need an agent, okay? I don't know if Bedard has one, but I think in this case, it would be beneficial for Bedard to not rely too much on an agent and figure things out for himself, all right? Okay, he's 19 years old. He's still got a long ways to go in his NHL career. I don't think it'd be a bad idea for him to sign an extension with the Blackhawks before the end of next year. But that's just my opinion. All right, and this is admittedly coming from a guy who's tired of all the negative articles surrounding the Blackhawks. All right, I knew they'd be in for a long rebuild. All right, yes, I'm frustrated with the way the season has gone. They have not made progress, and next year they really need to make a nice step forward. Need to take some huge strides forward. Like, they can't be bottom of the league anymore. They got to be at least competitive and fun to watch. Okay, for Bedard to be convinced. Now, okay, I won't hold it against Bedard if he signs a new contract with the Blackhawks this offseason, and then, like, say 3 seasons later, things don't seem to be going in the right direction at all for the Blackhawks. I wouldn't blame him then if he wanted to be traded to a more competitive team. All right, all I'm saying is give it some time, all right? Okay, let him sign that first contract, all right? Or let him do what he thinks he needs to do. I think Bedard's only 19, and sometimes I know we need some guidance on some things in life, and we don't know. Okay, let him figure these things out. If he thinks he needs guidance, then let him seek out that guidance. But if he thinks he knows what he wants to do, let him figure it out. Okay? All right? Not the same. And, of course, the Blackhawks, hey, it doesn't help that the Blackhawks are a bad team. Right now, we are not a good hockey program. And the good news is the Blackhawks, they've got a nice line of prospects in their prospect pool. And they got, like, some really good guys at Rockford. You got a guy from Minnesota by the name of Oliver Moore. Hopefully he makes his debut next season. Got other guys like Frank Nazar. And the Blackhawks, here's the thing. It's not necessarily that they aren't taking this winning business seriously. They're just trying not to rush their prospects, all right? They're trying not to rush them at all. And hey, I'm all for that. I don't want them to rush either. But if things continue to get worse, or if things don't continue to improve, it might be time to start really bringing up some of these prospects even maybe just a little quicker than you would like. Of course, stop. If things get better, then don't rush them, all right? Look, and I think Bedard understood the kind of situation that he was getting into himself. So, we all know that, hey, the Blackhawks have good prospects under the wings, waiting for their chance. All right, how much longer? We'll find out. And maybe that's a coaching problem too. Because some of these prospects, maybe they're ready and they're just they're not getting more opportunities. So, now, with all that being said, okay, we got to let Connor Bedard figure things out, all right? Enough of this negative media spotlight. Let's just let the kid figure things out himself, all right? And at the same time, the Blackhawks have got to figure out things, and they got to figure out a balance between getting those prospects ready and getting Bedard enough support to go out and win hockey games and make the Stanley Cup playoffs. So, and at the same time, keeping the star happy, okay? So it's this is mixed feelings for me. Media needs to leave Connor Bedard alone, and the Blackhawks need to do a better job building around Connor Bedard. Simple as that. All right, moving on before I blow too much steam out of my ears about the Blackhawks. All right, so now as far as the NCAA tournament goes, I'm gonna be really honest with you. This year's NCAA tournament is rather anticlimactic. Yes, we had a very, very exciting start in the first 4 with that Hail Mary that Alabama State made to knock out St. Francis and get into the round of 64 for the NCAA tournament. But so far, that's been the most exciting moment in this tournament. The rest is just, I don't know. Not saying there haven't been any good moments, but nothing quite like that. Of course, the game between Maryland and Colorado State. Exciting, pulse-pounding finish. It looked like Colorado State had stolen one from Maryland, but then Maryland comes right back down the court, and Derek Queen, the freshman, steals the game for the Maryland Terps, or steals it back from Colorado State, and sends Maryland to the Sweet 16 in an exciting, pulse-pounding finish in that round of 32 matchup. There are some people that are saying that Queen may have walked in that game, or traveled, but hey, it happens. All right, maybe it was a missed call by the refs, but I can't do anything about it. This is what it is at this point. Maryland's in the Sweet 16, whether we like it or not. And all the number 1 seeds and almost all the number 2. So 4 number 1 seeds onto the Sweet 16 and 3 number 2 seeds onto the Sweet 16. The only one, number 2 seed who did not make it was St. John's, who lost to Arkansas. Arkansas's athleticism and speed was just too much for St. John's. And St. John's also had picked the worst game to miss a lot of three-pointers and shots. So, hey, if you miss too many if you miss 3-point, if you're just off in even just one game, you're going home. Simple as that. So, looking at all the Sweet 16 matchups, there's not really like any true, maybe there's not really like any true underdogs. Like, there's not like a 12 seed that's in it, nor is it like a really, really low seed. Most of the teams that made it are very high seeds. All right. The lowest seed we have in the NCAA in the Sweet 16 is, I believe, Arkansas at number 10. That's right. They're probably the lowest seed that made it to the Sweet 16. They're a 10 seed. And props to John Calipari. His team has been battling injuries and a lot of other things, adversity all season long, and here they are in the Sweet 16. And of course, no surprise that Duke, Auburn, Tennessee, Houston, they're in the Sweet 16. No, not surprised about Michigan State either. And how about Michigan? All right, I'll give Michigan some props. Last season, this team was one of the bottom feeders of the Big Ten, and they've gone from winning, I think, only 8 conference games last season to a Sweet 16 appearance in their first season under Dusty May. So, kudos to Dusty May. He's really 180'd that program in a quick amount of time. So props to him. And in terms of that, and I will also say this, the Purdue Boilermakers. This is when I love to be wrong. I did not think Purdue was getting to the Sweet 16 this year. I thought they'd be around a 32 and done team. But I was wrong. This Purdue team, they've stepped up on the defensive side of the ball. They've stepped up rebounding. They're making shots. They've figured some things out. And as a result of that, they're in the Sweet 16. We've had and the bench has absolutely stepped up for Purdue. We'll see how much farther the Boilermakers can get, but a Sweet 16 appearance in a down year, not bad not bad. A Sweet 16 appearance, not bad for a team that really had an up and down season, or a down year if you want to call it that, compared to most seasons. So other thing I'm saying, back to kind of what I was saying. So these are all teams that you'd expect to be in the Sweet 16. And which leads me to my next point. A lot of these teams feature rosters that are made up of plenty of players who transferred from other schools. And what makes Purdue's Sweet 16 appearance all the more impressive, all their players, all 5 of their starters at the very least, all original Purdue Boilermakers. No one transferred to play for Purdue this offseason. And here they are in the Sweet 16 with all original Boilermakers. Every other team has a lot of transfers, or at least one transfer from other teams. And of course, all right, you know what? I'm just going to say this. This is why I dislike NIL. NIL and the transfer portal. It's hurting college basketball. And now it's hurt the competitive nature of the NCAA tournament. Going forward, upsets are going to be a lot harder to predict now. Or there's not going to be as many of them. I think the biggest upset we had was number 12 McNeese over number 5 Clemson in the Midwest. That was one of the few upsets. And then Colorado State over Memphis, that was another one. Aside from that, and then Drake over Maryland. But other than those 3, there weren't really that many upsets. So compared to years past, not saying this hasn't been a good NCAA tournament so far, but it's just doesn't have that exciting flair, doesn't have that drama, that chaos that makes all NCAA tournaments in the past special. So there just hasn't really been that exciting upset. There just hasn't really been as much of that excitement or chaos or drama that we know from the NCAA tournament. And I think the NLI and the portal had a lot to do with this. All the teams that advanced this season, they're there because those teams are stacked and because they have talent from other schools, and now it's a lot harder to compete with And you know what? The NIL has made it a lot harder for aspiring teams, like a 12 seed, to make a deep run in the NCAA tournament because the other team is already got some really good players, or players that are tournament capable players. So, and cutting it short. So, the NCAA tournament this season, it just doesn't have those ingredients that make an NCAA tournament memorable. So far, this tournament is lacking, sadly. Not saying it hasn't been a good tournament. There's been some exciting moments, but just not as many as we college basketball fans are accustomed to. And I think the transfer portal and name, image, and licensing had a lot to do with it, because it makes it hard for smaller schools, say like a McNeese or even say Grand Canyon, to get like a tournament caliber player who may have struggled on a tournament caliber team last season. So very hard. And of course, nowadays we got college basketball players looking for their own price to play for a certain program. So that's just my opinion on it. Just look, I enjoy the NCAA tournament as much as anybody, but this year's tournament, it's just missing some things. It hasn't been as exciting as it usually is, because you know what? If you want something to blame the NLI and blame the portal. Simple as that. You know, teams like Auburn, teams like Auburn, built from players all around the portal. Very rare now to find a team that's all original, say like Auburn Tigers or Tennessee Volunteers or Florida Gators, you know? A lot of these teams that are in the Sweet 16 were built off of players from the portal. And makes it all the more difficult for smaller schools who don't invest as much in NIL or the portal to compete with these kind of teams. These big name schools who always set the goal of making the Sweet 16 or the Final Fours. So, sadly, with NLI in place and with the transfer portal, it's getting a lot harder, or upsets are going to be more rarer to come by. So, just going to have to treasure those when they do happen in the NCAA tournament, because they're getting rare. Because this tournament, they were rare to come by. And I have a feeling that's how it's going to be for NCAA tournaments going forward. So, just a few thoughts from here. All right, Sweet 16 Elite 8 this season. Or Sweet 16 Elite 8 2025. Here we are, second weekend of the tournament. At the end of it all, when this weekend is all said and done, 4 teams will be heading to San Antonio for the Final Four. So I'll preview some of the matchups. We got Florida, Maryland in the West. Excuse me. Florida, Maryland. That is going to be a high-powered matchup. Oh, God. Maryland is so ferocious on defense. They're so athletic. They got great length, too. They can, they're one of 4 Big Ten teams that made it. Who would have thought we'd have 4 Big Ten teams make the second weekend? And we had 7 SEC teams. Incredible number. And college realignment. That's another impact. That's an impact that college realignment has had on this NCAA tournament. Now, 2 conferences right now have the most teams right now, the SEC and the Big Ten. Here's an SEC Big Ten shutout between Maryland and Florida. Gonna be a good one. I had picked Maryland to advance past Florida in the Sweet 16 because I thought their athleticism and their length and their ability to defend and create shots was one thing that was going to get them far in this tournament. And they still could get past Florida, but watching both of these teams, I'm not so sure that happens anymore, because Florida, they can rally from anything. They faced a team that was having a down year, but still a terrific, terrific team in UConn. UConn was taking them to the wire. And UConn could have won that game against Florida, but Florida went on a run when they needed it most, and UConn just didn't have an answer. That Florida team is athletic, they're fast, and whatever Maryland could do, Florida could match up stride to stride. This matchup is very tough to call right now. Then we got MSU taking on Ole Miss, another Big Ten SEC matchup. Chris Beard, he likes to play defense. He loves his teams to play defense, a tough defense. Against another team like Michigan State, who is also fantastic on the defensive side of the ball. That matchup is going to be absolutely... Now, if you're an average college basketball fan, you'll enjoy that matchup. But if you're an MSU or Ole Miss fan, that matchup is probably going to stress you out a bit. Because both these teams like to get... They will step on it defensively. Michigan versus Auburn. Michigan's got those two bigs. Bigs can help you get far in this tournament. But can they match the potential of Janai Broome and those Auburn Tigers? And Bruce Pearl versus Dusty May. Both of them have been to a Final Four. One of them's looking to get back to it. This could be a very good coaching matchup. And then you got Duke versus Arizona. These two teams have met before. So here we go again with that matchup. Duke got a lot of size, a lot of speed, a lot of athleticism. Arizona, they got some athleticism too. But do they have enough to keep up with Duke, who's just been tough to beat all season? And then you got teams like Alabama taking on, how about this, BYU. First Sweet 16 in a long time for BYU. This should be a good matchup. And they made it this far, and so far, if you want a Cinderella, that's another thing with this NCAA tournament that is lacking. There's just not really a true Cinderella when we think about it. But maybe this BYU team could be that Cinderella. Alabama, though, they got Mark Sears, got a lot of shooters on that team. Nelson playing really, really well at center. Does BYU have enough to stop Alabama? We'll find out. Going on to the Midwest, top 3 seeds there. You got Kentucky versus Tennessee, and you got Houston and Purdue ready to go at it. So, Kentucky and Tennessee, they meet again. SEC on SEC. I do like Tennessee in this matchup. I think they have much more experience than this young UK team, or University of Kentucky team, but don't underestimate Mark Pope and his Wildcats. They're fast, they're physical, they're athletic. They could give Tennessee some trouble. And if their defense plays well enough, they'll have a chance to upset Tennessee. Houston and Purdue. Okay. This is going to be a tough one for Purdue. This will be a test. Purdue needs to cut down on the turnovers, all right? They got to cut down on the turnovers. Too many of those against Houston, and you will lose. Houston ended up having a dogfight with Gonzaga. So this game's going to be a good one. At Purdue, they've stepped up their efforts, as I mentioned, defensively, off the glass, on rebounding, and, of course, their bench has stepped up. So they're going to need much more of that to take down this Houston team. Much more of that. And you might have to be darn well close to perfect to beat Houston, because Houston looks much improved this season compared to the last. So Purdue, do what you've been doing the last 2 games. Don't turn the ball over, or it's going to be a long night in the heart of Indy. And, of course, Purdue has just one advantage in this game. One advantage over Houston. Home field advantage. Home crowd. Because the game is in Indianapolis. How about that? The number 1 seed is going to be playing what's going to feel like a road game against Purdue, because the game's in Indianapolis. And the Purdue fans, they travel well. And Indy's only like 60 miles away from West Lafayette. So, home game right there for Purdue. But can Purdue take enough of advantage of that to beat Houston? And can they force some turnovers and not turn the ball over too many times? We'll find out. And one other matchup I didn't mention. Texas Tech and Texas Tech against Arkansas. Okay, Texas Tech, they're tough. Big 12 team. They played really well all season. This Arkansas team, they may have gotten hot at the right time. They've been through a lot, and it feels like they're coming together at the right time. And John Calipari, he looks refreshed as a coach in Arkansas. Like, this has been regardless of how the season ends for him, it's been a clean, fresh start for John Calipari. And you know what? He's done a really good job this year coaching up the Razorbacks, especially with all that they've been through and the fact that he's gotten them as far as he has. It's outstanding. So John Calipari, I think he still has something left in the tank at Arkansas. But can he match the intensity that Texas Tech is going to bring? That we're about to find out. Okay. So my Final Four, as I mentioned, was Michigan State, Duke, Tennessee, and St. John's. I'm going to say this. I'm still thinking Michigan State. I'm still thinking Duke. And I'm still thinking Tennessee get to the Final Four. I think Michigan State will play Auburn, and I think that they'll take them down. I've got Duke playing. So I had Duke playing Wisconsin, but Wisconsin didn't make it to the Sweet 16. So I'm going to say Duke over Alabama in the Elite Eight in the East. And that's good. That matchup's going to be cinema. So we might be primed for some great matchups, as much as we've missed the upsets this year. And then Tennessee, I just don't know if Purdue's going to have enough for Houston. They may need to be darn perfect. So I think Purdue's going to fall short against Houston, but we'll see. And then we got Tennessee and Houston. I think Tennessee, regardless of whether, it pains me to say this as a Purdue fan, but whether it's Purdue or Tennessee or Houston, I think Tennessee has enough to beat either team. So I'm still going with Tennessee to make their first Final Four. And then the West. The West is always wild, isn't it? It just is. That's just the way it is. You know what? My gut tells me Florida's going to make the Final Four now. Because my original pick out of the West was St. John's. But with the way Florida's looking, and with Maryland just barely escaping Colorado State, I think Florida's just going to be a bit too much for both Maryland and either Texas Tech or John Calipari's Razorbacks. So that's my new predictions for the Final Four. So I'm still sticking with what I had before, but since St. John's got knocked out, I got a feeling it's going to be Florida. But we'll see. All right, on to this day in sports history. And on this day, the 26th of March, 1886, the 48th Grand National. Tommy Skelton wins aboard at 25-1 Chance Old Joe. So this is horse racing we're talking about. All right, sports fans, that's all I got for this week's Waxon Wednesday. Hope you've enjoyed and hope you're enjoying the madness, everyone. That's all for now. Jake Waxman from Two Guys Talk Sports signing off.